The polished marble of the St. Jude Private Medical Center reflected a life Liam Donovan had meticulously built, flawless, expensive, and emotionally sterile. Beside him, Chloe Sterling, a vibrant masterpiece of youth and beauty, pouted for a selfie, complaining about a vague stomachache that was her ticket to his undivided attention. Liam, immersed in the blue glow of his phone, offered placating murmurs, his mind closing a 7-figure real estate deal. He was a master of his universe, a conductor of a symphony of success, but he never saw the crescendo coming. A sudden commotion, the squeal of gurney wheels, and a flash of dark, sweat-soaked hair. His universe didn't just stop, it shattered. Because on that gurney, fighting through the agony of childbirth, was Dr. Elena Vance, his ex-wife, a woman he hadn't seen in a year. And she was terrifyingly, undeniably pregnant. The air in the lobby of St. Jude smelled of money. It was a crisp, clean scent, a calculated blend of industrial antiseptic and the subtle, expensive fragrance of fresh lilies arranged in a vase the size of a small child. Liam Donovan breathed it in, the scent a confirmation of his own status. At 36, he didn't just occupy spaces like this. He owned them, metaphorically and sometimes literally. His tailored Tom Ford suit felt like a second skin, a suit of armor for the modern-day king. Do you think it's an ulcer, Liam? My mother's cousin got one from stress, and she said it was just agonizing. Chloe's voice, usually a light, musical thing, was laced with a theatrical tremor of worry. She clutched his arm, her perfectly manicured nails a shade of blush pink that matched her Chanel bag. At 24, Chloe viewed the world as a stage and herself as its leading lady. Liam glanced away from his phone, where he was finalizing the terms on a waterfront property in Laurelhurst. It's not an ulcer, Chloe. You had spicy tacos last night. Dr. Miller will probably give you an antacid and send us home. He offered a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. It was a practiced, disarming expression he used to close deals and dismiss concerns in equal measure. But it feels serious, she insisted, leaning her head on his shoulder. Her hair, a cascade of honey blonde extensions, smelled of jasmine and ambition. He patted her hand absently. That's why we're here. The best care money can buy. They settled into plush leather armchairs in the waiting area, a space designed to look more like a luxury hotel than a hospital. This was his world, curated, controlled, and comfortable. Chloe was a part of that curation. After his divorce from Eleanor, he had craved vibrancy, simplicity. Chloe was that, a beautiful, uncomplicated creature who admired his success and asked for little more than his Omex and his presence at industry galas. She was the perfect accessory to his new life. His ex-wife, Dr. Elena Vance, had been the opposite. Or so he told himself now. Elena was foundational. In their decade together, she had been the bedrock on which he'd built his empire. A brilliant pediatrician, she possessed a quiet strength and an unnerving ability to see right through his carefully constructed bravado. She'd hosted dinners, charmed his clients with her intellect, and held him together when a risky venture nearly bankrupted them in the early years. But her strength had begun to feel like a weight. Her quiet nature felt like judgment. He'd told his friends over single malt scotch that she'd stopped trying, that she'd grown too comfortable in their quiet, orderly life. She became ordinary, he'd say, with a dismissive wave of his hand, as if their shared history was a piece of lint to be brushed from his lapel. The truth, a truth he kept locked away, was that Elena's depth had started to expose his own shallowness. Her contentment with a simple evening at home felt like a criticism of his insatiable hunger for more. He'd mistaken her peace for complacency, her stability for stagnation. So he had left, seeking the easy, reflective shine of someone like Chloe, who mirrored his own ambition back at him. What Liam never knew, what he couldn't have fathomed, was the secret Elena had carried out the door with her. 8 months ago, the week before their divorce was finalized, she had sat alone in her bathroom, staring at a positive pregnancy test, her world tilting on its axis. The news was a cruel twist of fate. He had already moved out, his heart and mind already occupied by his new life. Telling him then would have felt like begging, like using a child as a bargaining chip to reclaim a man who was already gone. Elena Vance did not beg, so she'd signed the papers, her hand shaking, and walked away to face the storm alone, a quiet warrior protecting the life growing inside her. Would this dress look good on me for the fundraiser? Chloe's voice pulled him from his thoughts. She held up her phone, displaying a photo of a celebrity in a glittering, backless gown. Liam offered another reflex smile. You'd look stunning in anything, babe. His eyes were already drifting back to his screen, to the world of contracts and commissions. He was comfortable. He was in control. But in the sterile, silent halls of St. Jude's, fate was preparing to remind him that control was just an illusion, a beautiful, gilded cage of his own making. The hushed atmosphere of the waiting room was suddenly broken by a surge of activity down the main corridor. A sense of controlled chaos rippled through the air, the rapid squeak of rubber-soled shoes on polished linoleum, urgent, clipped voices cutting through the low hum of the air conditioner. "Page Dr. Albright! We need her in maternity, room 3, stat! Heart rate is dropping. Let's move, people!" Liam glanced up, a flicker of detached curiosity in his eyes. It was the kind of drama that happened in hospitals, a world away from his own. Chloe, engrossed in an online shopping app, didn't even look up. He was about to return to his emails when the gurney shot past the wide entrance to their waiting area, and he saw her. Time didn't just slow down, it fractured. His phone, a $60,000 Vertu that was his lifeline to the world, slipped from his numb fingers and landed with a soft, muffled thud on his lap. The air in his lungs turned to ice. It was Eleanor. There was no mistaking her, even in this state of raw vulnerability. Her dark, wavy hair was plastered to her forehead with sweat. Her face, usually so composed and serene, was pale and contorted in a mask of exquisite pain. One hand gripped the metal rail of the gurney with white-knuckled intensity, the other instinctively shielding her swollen, protruding belly. Pregnant. Not just pregnant. Imminently, terrifyingly pregnant. Liam's own heart started to pound against his ribs like a trapped bird. He blinked, a desperate, futile attempt to erase the image. But she was real. This was not a memory or a ghost. This was Dr. Elena Vance, his ex-wife, the woman he had labeled as ordinary and stagnant, being wheeled toward a delivery room, her body in the throes of bringing a child into the world. For a single, eternal second, their eyes met. In that fleeting glance, he saw a hurricane. He saw the physical agony of labor, but beneath it was a storm of emotions he recognized all too well because he had caused them. There was anger, cold and sharp. There was the sting of betrayal, and there was something else. Something deeper that looked like a profound, soul-crushing shame, as if being seen by him in this moment was the ultimate humiliation. She looked away first, her jaw tightening, and the gurney disappeared behind a set of swinging double doors bearing the words, "Maternity Wing." "Liam, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." Chloe's voice sounded like it was coming from the end of a long tunnel. He snapped back to the present, but the sleek, taupe-walled waiting room felt alien, a movie set he'd stumbled onto by mistake. "Nothing," he muttered, his own voice sounding hoarse and unfamiliar. I thought I saw someone I knew. Chloe frowned, her brow furrowing as she followed his gaze to the now empty hallway. Who? You're acting so weird. Liam shook his head, struggling to summon the confident mask he wore every day. Nobody. Nobody important. Let's focus on you. But the words were hollow, tasteless ash in his mouth. The weight in his chest wasn't just heavy. It was suffocating. Inside his mind, a tempest was raging. Pregnant? How? How far along? He frantically did the math, his brain scrambling to recall the last few weeks of their marriage. It had been a cold, desolate landscape of silent dinners and sleeping in separate rooms. But there had been one night, a desperate, whiskey-fueled attempt to find some remnant of the love they'd lost. It was possible. More than possible. It was a certainty, and if it was true, and he knew, with a gut-wrenching certainty that it was, why hadn't she told him? Why would she hide something so monumental? A cold, slithering guilt began to coil around his spine. He had walked away from their marriage, convinced he was freeing himself, that Elena was an anchor holding him back from the life he deserved. But seeing her on that gurney, so fragile, yet radiating a primal strength he had never witnessed before, he was struck by a terrifying thought. What if he hadn't been freeing himself? What if he'd just been running? I think I'll ask Dr. Miller to check my iron levels too, Chloe was saying, oblivious to the tectonic plates shifting beneath Liam's feet. I've been feeling so tired lately. Liam wasn't listening. His mind was in that hallway, on that gurney, lost in the hurricane in Eleanor's eyes. He had to know. He had to face the ghost he had tried so hard to bury. But how do you confront the past when it's screaming its way into the present? The minutes stretched into an eternity. The sleek, minimalist clock on the wall ticked with agonizing slowness, each second a hammer blow against Liam's fragile composure. Chloe had finally been called in for her appointment, leaving him alone in the silent waiting room, a prisoner of his own thoughts. The taupe walls seemed to be closing in, the sophisticated leather chairs feeling less like luxury and more like a witness box. He was a father. He might be a father. He was a father. The thought cycled through his brain, each repetition stripping away another layer of his denial. He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over Elena's contact. Their last text exchange, nearly a year ago, was a sterile, transactional conversation about splitting their art collection. It was cold, efficient, and final. Like a business deal. What could he possibly type now? Hey, saw you at the hospital. Looks like you're in labor. Just curious, is that my kid? The absurdity of it was nauseating. The cruelty of it, even more so. He shoved the phone back into his pocket and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, staring out at the grey, drizzling Seattle sky. The city's infamous gloom had never bothered him before. It was just atmospheric background noise. Today, it felt like a reflection of the suffocating weight in his chest. Elena was in a room somewhere behind those double doors, going through the most intense experience of her life, and she was doing it alone. The word echoed in his mind. Alone. 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 Because of him. He replayed the last year of their marriage in his head, not the curated, self-serving version he told his friends, but the real one. He saw the nights he'd come home late, smelling of cocktails and someone else's perfume. He remembered the anniversaries he'd forgotten, the important conversations he'd dismissed with a wave of his hand and a comment about a looming deadline. He'd starved their marriage of oxygen, then blamed it for suffocating. And Elena, he saw her not as the complacent woman he'd imagined, but as someone weathering a silent storm. He remembered her growing quieter, her smiles becoming more fragile. He had mistaken her retreat for apathy. But now he saw it for what it was: self-preservation. She wasn't giving up. She was bracing for the impact he was about to cause. Guilt was a foreign emotion to Liam Donovan. He was a man who made decisions and moved on. Regret was an inefficiency, a waste of emotional capital. But this was different. This wasn't a bad business deal or a missed opportunity. This was a human being. Two, in fact. Elena and a child. His child. A child who had been growing and developing for 9 months. A secret life running parallel to his own. While he was celebrating new contracts with champagne and Chloe, Eleanor was going to doctor's appointments alone. While he was choosing marble for his new penthouse bathroom, she was choosing a crib. The sheer scale of her solitude, of her strength, was staggering, and it was an indictment of everything he had become. His phone buzzed. A text from Chloe. "Dr. Miller says it's just gastritis. He's giving me a prescription. So dramatic, I know. Be out in 5. The message, with its casual self-absorption, landed with a thud. A week ago, an hour ago, he would have found it charmingly predictable. Now it felt jarringly trivial. Chloe's world was small, shiny, and centered on herself. He had wanted that. He had actively sought out that simplicity. But now it felt like living in a dollhouse when a hurricane was raging outside. He had to do something. He couldn't just sit here. He walked toward the maternity wing, his expensive loafers making no sound on the pristine floor. He stopped at the double doors, a formidable barrier between his old life and his new reality. He had no right to cross that threshold. He had abdicated that right when he signed the divorce papers. A nurse bustled past, her arms full of blankets. "Excuse me," Liam said, his voice raspy. My ex-wife was just admitted. Elena Vance. I was wondering if there's any update." The nurse gave him a sympathetic but professional look. "Are you listed as her emergency contact, sir?" The question hit him like a punch to the gut. Of course he wasn't. He had made sure of that, severing all legal and emotional ties with cold precision. "No," he said, the word tasting like defeat. "No, I'm not." "Then I'm sorry. I can't give you any information due to patient privacy laws." She gave him a small, pitying smile and disappeared through the doors. He was locked out. A stranger to the most important event of his life. He stood there, adrift in the hallway, the successful Liam Donovan completely and utterly powerless. The scent of antiseptic seemed to mock him, a reminder of the sterile life he had chosen over the messy, beautiful, terrifying reality of family. He had to talk to her. He had to know the truth. But before he could formulate another plan, a different nurse appeared, holding a clipboard and looking around the hallway. Her eyes landed on him. "Mr. Donovan." His heart leapt into his throat. "Yes, Dr. Vance has been asking for you." The nurse's expression was unreadable, a mixture of professional duty and something that might have been curiosity. "She's in recovery. Mother and baby are stable. You can go in if you're ready." Following the nurse was like walking the Green Mile. Each step down the hushed corridor of the maternity wing echoed with the pounding of his own blood. The cheerful, pastel-colored walls felt like a cruel joke. He passed rooms filled with the sounds of soft cooing and happy murmurs, each one a testament to a joy he had willingly forfeited. The nurse's words replayed in his mind. Mother and baby are stable. A baby. A real, living, breathing baby. His baby. She stopped at a door numbered 307 and gave him a brief, clinical nod. "She's just inside. Be gentle. She's been through a lot." Liam pushed the door open with a hand that trembled slightly. The room was dim, the only light coming from a large window overlooking a rain-slicked hospital garden. The air smelled of antiseptic, baby powder, and something else. the raw, metallic scent of childbirth. Elena was propped up against a mountain of pillows, her face pale and exhausted, but a profound calm had settled over her features. She looked like a ship that had weathered a hurricane and finally found a safe harbor. And in her arms, swaddled in a soft blue blanket, was a tiny, perfect infant. The baby had a tuft of dark hair, just like hers, and its eyes were closed in peaceful sleep. Liam froze in the doorway, his feet cemented to the floor. This was the moment, the point of no return. Elena looked up, her gaze meeting his. There was no anger in her eyes now, no hatred, just a chilling, weary indifference that was somehow worse. "You came," she said. Her voice was hoarse, a fragile thread of sound, but it was steady. "I wasn't sure you would." He wanted to say 1,000 things. "Are you okay? Is he mine? Why didn't you tell me? I'm so sorry." But the words were log-jammed in his throat, a chaotic mess of guilt and shock. All he managed was a weak, "Elena, I saw you in the hallway. I didn't know." A bitter, humorless smile touched her lips. It was a sharp, painful expression. "You didn't know a lot of things, did you, Liam?" She stroked the baby's head, a gesture of such innate tenderness it made Liam's chest ache. "He was born an hour ago. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. After 12 hours of labor. Alone." That last word landed like a physical blow. He took a hesitant step into the room, his eyes fixed on the small bundle in her arms. Is he mine?" The question tumbled out, clumsy and raw. Elena raised an eyebrow, as if the question itself were an insult. "What do you think, Liam? Do you think this is some elaborate game? Yes, he's yours. But don't for a second think that changes anything." Her words stung, each one a perfectly aimed dart. He felt the room tilt, and he reached out, gripping the cool metal foot of the bed for support. "Elena, if I had known, I swear I would have—" She cut him off with a tired wave of her hand. "Would have what? Rushed to my side? Played the doting father-to-be? Dumped your girlfriend? Don't make promises you can't keep, Liam. You were never good at it." "I should have known," he whispered, more to himself than to her. "You should have told me." This time, she let out a short, sharp laugh, devoid of any humor. "Told you? When? The day you had your lawyer send over the final papers? Or maybe I should have interrupted one of your celebratory dinners with her." She gestured vaguely toward the door. "Telling you would have meant asking for something, and I was done asking for your attention. I wasn't going to beg you to be a father any more than I was going to beg you to be a husband." Something inside him cracked. Every word was true. He had created this reality. He had made her feel that her only option was to go through this alone. He looked at the baby again, a tiny, innocent being caught in the wreckage of their marriage. Awe and terror warred within him. "What's his name?" he asked, his voice thick with unshed tears. "Noah," she said, her tone softening for the first time as she gazed down at her son. "His name is Noah." A genuine, loving smile transformed her tired face. "He's perfect." Liam took another step forward, a silent plea. Can I hold him?" Elena hesitated, her eyes searching his face, weighing him, judging him. Finally, after a long, tense moment, she nodded. "Be careful." His head. She gently transferred the warm, light bundle into his arms. The moment Noah's weight settled against his chest, Liam's world rearranged itself. This was real. This small, fragile, perfect creature was his son. His hands shook as he held the baby, a feeling of profound reverence washing over him. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about deals or status or money. There was only this moment, this miracle. "Elena," he said, his voice breaking. "I want to be a part of his life. I want to be his father." Her eyes hardened again. "Being a father isn't a title you claim, Liam. It's a job you do. Every single day. It's sacrifice. It's putting someone else's needs so far ahead of your own, you forget what yours even were. Do you even know what that means?" Before he could answer, the door swung open. Chloe burst in mid-sentence. "Liam, the pharmacy downstairs is taking forever, but I got you a coffee. I figured you'd be—" Oh. She stopped dead, her eyes widening as she took in the scene. Liam, holding a newborn baby. Elena, pale and exhausted in the hospital bed. The tableau was undeniable, shocking and catastrophic. The air in the room became thick, heavy, and ready to shatter. What is going on here?" Chloe's voice was a trembling whisper of disbelief and dawning fury. Liam opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He was trapped, a deer in the headlights of his own making. Elena, her expression unreadable, spoke with a calm, deliberate clarity that sliced through the tension like a scalpel. "Chloe, meet Noah. He's my son, and he's Liam's." The silence that followed Eleanor's declaration was a living thing. It filled the corners of the room, pressing in on them, amplifying the frantic thumping of Liam's heart and the sharp, incredulous inhales from Chloe. "His son?" Chloe's voice cracked. She took a step back, her hand flying to her mouth. Her wide, betrayed eyes darted from the baby in Liam's arms to Eleanor's impassive face, and finally back to Liam, burning with a furious, wounded light. "You have a child? With her?" She let out a laugh that was more like a sob. "When, exactly, were you planning on telling me about this, Liam? Or was this just something I was supposed to find out by accident?" "Chloe, I swear I didn't know," Liam pleaded, his voice strained. He carefully, reluctantly, handed Noah back to Eleanor, feeling an immediate, hollow sense of loss. "I just found out. Right now. I saw her in the hallway and—" His words trailed off, lame and insufficient. Chloe wasn't listening. She crossed her arms, a defensive posture that did little to hide how much she was trembling. "New to you? And what am I in this equation, Liam? Just a placeholder? A fun distraction while you were secretly building a family with your ex-wife?" She rounded on Eleanor, her voice rising with hysteria. "And you? What kind of game are you playing? Hiding a baby for 9 months? What are you trying to do? Ruin his life?" Elena looked at Chloe, not with anger, but with a kind of weary pity. "I'm not trying to ruin anyone's life," she said, her voice still quiet but firm. "I'm trying to take care of mine. And my son's." The calm, rational response only seemed to fuel Chloe's rage. She spun back to Liam, her face blotchy with tears. "You have to choose, Liam. Right now. Her. And this." She gestured vaguely at the mother and child, as if they were a piece of unfortunate luggage. "Or me. Our life." The ultimatum hung in the air, a guillotine blade poised over his neck. He looked at Elena, who was calmly rocking Noah, her gaze fixed on her son's face, a portrait of maternal serenity that seemed to exist on a different plane from the chaos erupting around her. Then he looked at Chloe, her beautiful face contorted with anger and hurt, demanding an answer he didn't have. "Chloe, I can't," he stammered. "I need time. I just found out I'm a father." "Time!" she shrieked, the sound high and sharp. "You think I'm going to sit around and wait for you to play happy families with your secret baby mama? No, Liam. I am worth more than that." She grabbed her purse from the floor where she'd dropped it, her movements jerky and furious. With one last, tear-filled glare of utter betrayal, she stormed out of the room, slamming the door so hard that a framed picture on the wall rattled. The ensuing silence was deafening, broken only by the soft, rhythmic beeping of a monitor and a tiny sigh from Noah. Liam ran a hand through his hair, his entire body trembling with adrenaline and shock. He looked at Elena, expecting to see triumph or satisfaction in her eyes. Instead, there was nothing. She was still just watching her son. "You didn't have to be so blunt with her," he said finally, the words coming out as a weak accusation. Elena looked up at him, her eyes cool. "And you didn't have to stand there in silence. But here we are." She adjusted Noah's blanket, her movements economical and precise. "Go after her, Liam, if that's what you want." Her words weren't a challenge, they were a dismissal, a quiet, final release. He had a choice. He could chase after the life he thought he wanted, the easy, shiny, uncomplicated life that had just slammed the door in his face. Or he could stay here, in this quiet, complicated room, and face the wreckage he had made. He looked at Elena one last time, at the dark circles under her eyes, at the fierce, protective curve of her arm around their son. He was searching for something, a sign, a plea, a flicker of the love they once shared. But she gave him nothing. Her expression was a closed door, a look that said, "Prove it. Don't tell me you've changed. Show me." He turned and left the room, the hallway feeling infinitely longer than it had before. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from Chloe. "I'm in the Uber. This is your last chance, Liam." He stopped, his hand on the elevator button, torn. The man he had been for the last year, the man who craved success and simplicity above all else, screamed at him to run, to fix it, to choose the easy path. But the image of Noah's tiny, perfect face, the feeling of his son's weight in his arms, was a powerful, new anchor. For the first time, he felt the pull of something more important than himself. He let the elevator doors close without him. He slid his phone into his pocket, ignoring the buzzing, and walked back to room 307. He didn't knock. He just opened the door and stood there, a man stripped of his armor, his arrogance, and all his easy answers. Elena looked up, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. He didn't speak. He just walked over to the chair in the corner of the room, sat down, and waited. He didn't know what he was waiting for. Forgiveness? A conversation? A chance? He only knew one thing with absolute certainty. He wasn't running anymore. The days that followed were a masterclass in purgatory. Liam kept his vigil, spending hours in the uncomfortable visitor's chair in Eleanor's room. He was a silent, peripheral figure in her new world. He watched nurses come and go. He watched Eleanor learn the rhythms of her newborn son, the fussy cries that meant hunger, the soft whimpers that meant he needed a change. He watched, and he learned from a distance. They barely spoke. The space between them was thick with unspoken words, with a year of pain and a lifetime of broken promises. When Eleanor was discharged, he offered to drive her, but she just shook her head. "My mother is coming. We'll be fine." "Where are you going?" he asked, a note of desperation creeping into his voice. "To my mum's place in Tacoma. I need the help." She said it without looking at him, her focus entirely on securing Noah into his car seat. The message was clear. She needed help, just not his. He returned to his penthouse, a sterile glass box overlooking Elliott Bay. It had once been his sanctuary, a monument to his success. Now it felt empty, haunted by the ghosts of his choices. Chloe's things were gone. There was no angry note, no final text, just a void where she used to be. He felt a pang of guilt for the pain he'd caused her, but it was a distant, intellectual pang, completely overshadowed by the raw, visceral connection he felt to the son he barely knew. He tried calling Elena. The calls went straight to voicemail. He sent texts, cautious, simple messages. "Hope you're both settling in well. Let me know if you need anything. I'd like to see Noah." They went unanswered. He was being shut out, and he deserved it. But the image of Noah and the terrifying realization of what Eleanor had gone through alone wouldn't let him rest. He was a problem solver, a deal maker. He couldn't fix this with money or charm. He didn't know what to do. A week later, desperation won. He drove the hour south to Tacoma, to the quiet, tree-lined street where Elena's mother, Isabel Vance, lived. He remembered the house from their early dating years, a modest, welcoming home with a sprawling garden and a porch swing. He parked at the end of the block, his courage failing him. What right did he have to show up here? As he sat there, the engine ticking, he saw Isabel walk out onto the porch. She was a woman with a gentle face, but eyes that missed nothing. She saw his car instantly. She stared at it for a long moment before sighing and gesturing for him to come. He got out, his heart pounding, and walked up the pathway. "She won't see you," Isabel said, her voice not unkind, but firm. She crossed her arms, a barrier between him and the house. "Isabel, please," he said. "I just want to help. I want to be a father to him." Isabel studied him, her gaze piercing. "Do you have any idea what she's been through, Liam? Any idea at all?" "I know I wasn't there," he said, shame coloring his words. "I know she did it alone, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life." Isabel let out a short, sharp breath that sounded suspiciously like a scoff. "You think her being alone was the worst of it? You don't know the half of it." She hesitated, wrestling with a decision. "She'll kill me for telling you this. But you need to know. You need to understand the weight of what you walked away from." She pushed open the screen door. "Come inside, I'll make coffee." He followed her into the warm, cluttered living room, filled with books and photos. The house smelled of lemon polish and yeast. He sat on the edge of the sofa as Isabel prepared 2 mugs in the adjoining kitchen. She returned and handed him one, her expression grim. "When Elena found out she was pregnant," Isabel began, her voice low, "it wasn't just a shock. It was a medical crisis." Liam frowned. "What do you mean?" During a routine early checkup, a doctor found something, an irregularity in her heartbeat. They ran tests. It turned out she has a condition called peripartum cardiomyopathy, PPCM. Isabel said the name like a curse. It's a rare form of heart failure that happens during the last month of pregnancy or up to 5 months after giving birth. The pregnancy itself was putting an incredible strain on her heart. The doctors told her that continuing with the pregnancy was a significant risk to her life. The coffee mug slipped from Liam's numb fingers, crashing onto the carpet and splashing dark liquid across the floor. He didn't even notice. The air had been sucked from the room. "Heart failure?" he whispered, the words catching in his throat. Isabel's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. She spent the last 6 months in a constant state of fear. In and out of cardiologists' offices, weekly stress tests, endless medications, all while trying not to stress so it wouldn't affect the baby. She had to cut her hours at the clinic. Some days, she was so weak she could barely get out of bed. Isabel leaned forward, her eyes boring into his. She fought for that baby, Liam. She risked her own life to bring your son into this world. And she did it utterly and completely alone, because the man who should have been holding her hand was busy building a new life. The silence in the room was absolute. Liam couldn't breathe. The carefully constructed walls of his self-serving narrative, that Elena was fine, that she was strong, that she hadn't needed him, were not just cracked. They were obliterated. She hadn't just been pregnant and alone. She had been sick, terrified, and facing her own mortality. The guilt he'd felt before was a pale shadow compared to the soul-crushing agony that engulfed him now. It was a physical weight, pressing down, threatening to pulverize him. He had been so wrapped up in his own selfish desires that he had been blind to her suffering. He had abandoned her not just emotionally, but at the moment she had needed him most in her entire life. He finally understood the look in her eyes on that gurney. It wasn't just anger. It was the look of a soldier who had survived a war, only to see the man who had sent her to the front lines show up for the victory parade. Isabel's voice softened slightly. Her heart is still weak. The delivery was hard on her. She needs another echo in a few weeks to see if it's recovering. She might need ongoing treatment. She's not out of the woods yet. She stood up, picking up the broken shards of the mug. She's sleeping now, and so is Noah. You should go, Liam. He stood on shaky legs, a man utterly undone. Isabel, Words are easy, Liam, she said, not looking at him. Actions are what matter now. That little boy in there deserves a father. And that woman in there, she deserves a hell of a lot more than an apology. He walked out of the house and back to his car, the world muted and grey. He wasn't just a bad husband anymore. He was a monster. And for the first time in his life, Liam Donovan had no idea how to fix what he had broken. The drive back to Seattle was a blur. Liam's hands gripped the steering wheel of his Porsche, but he felt disconnected from the machine, a passenger in his own life. Isabel's words echoed in his mind, a brutal, relentless chorus. Heart failure. She risked her own life. She did it alone. He didn't go back to the penthouse. The thought of its silent, empty spaces was unbearable. Instead, he drove to a nondescript hotel near the airport, a place of transient anonymity where no one knew Liam Donovan, the real estate mogul. He checked in under a different name and spent the night staring at the ceiling, the full weight of his failures pressing down on him. Sleep was impossible. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Eleanor on that gurney, her face a mask of pain, and he felt a fresh wave of self-loathing. By morning, something had shifted. The crushing guilt was still there, a permanent resident in his soul, but alongside it, a new, fierce resolve was taking root. Isabel was right. Words were meaningless. Apologies were cheap. Redemption wasn't something you asked for. It was something you earned. He spent the next 2 days in that hotel room, not making deals but making a plan. He opened his laptop and, for the first time, used it for something other than work. He researched peripartum cardiomyopathy, devouring medical journals and patient forums. He read about symptoms, treatments, and recovery rates. He learned about the dietary restrictions, the need for absolute rest, the emotional toll it took on new mothers. He then moved on to newborns. He read about feeding schedules, sleep patterns, colic, and swaddling. He watched instructional videos on how to change a diaper, his brow furrowed in concentration as he tried to memorize the steps. It was the most important research of his life, and he felt woefully, terrifyingly unprepared. His first action was practical. He went online and ordered a mountain of supplies to be delivered to Isabel's house. Not just the basics like diapers and wipes, but a top-of-the-line meal delivery service that specialized in heart-healthy, low-sodium meals for new mothers. He ordered a comfortable rocking chair, a white noise machine, and a baby monitor with video and breathing sensors. He didn't ask permission. He just did it. The first delivery arrived the next day. A few hours later, his phone rang. It was an unknown number. He answered, his heart hammering. "What do you think you're doing?" Elena's voice was tired, but there was an edge of steel to it. "I'm helping," he said simply. "I didn't ask for your help. I don't want your money, Liam. You can't buy your way back into this." "I know that," he said, his voice quiet. "This isn't for you to forgive me. This is for Noah. And it's for your health. You need to rest, Elena. You need to eat well. Let me at least do this." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. He could hear Noah fussing in the background. "The rocking chair is nice," she conceded, her voice softening, almost imperceptibly. "Noah likes it." Another pause. "You can come see him. Tomorrow. 2:00. For 1 hour." She hung up before he could reply. It was a start. A tiny crack of light in the fortress she had built around herself. He arrived at Isabel's house the next day, at 1:55 p.m., not with flowers or gifts, but with 2 bags of groceries filled with fresh fruit and vegetables. Isabel let him in with a nod, her expression unreadable. Elena was in the new rocking chair, holding Noah. She looked exhausted, the shadows under her eyes darker than before, but her gaze was clear and direct. "Hello, Liam." "Elena." He stood awkwardly in the middle of the living room, feeling like an intruder. "Do you want to hold him?" she asked, her tone matter-of-fact. He nodded, his throat tight. He sat on the sofa as she showed him how to properly support Noah's head. She placed the baby in his arms, and once again, the world melted away. Noah was awake this time, his dark, curious eyes staring up at him. Liam's finger gently traced the curve of the baby's cheek. "He looks like you," Elena said quietly from the chair. "He has your eyes. He has your strength," Liam replied without thinking, the words raw and honest. Elena looked away, a flicker of emotion crossing her face before she shuttered it again. They sat in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the soft gurgling from Noah. "We need to talk about the logistics," Elena said, her voice turning businesslike. It was familiar territory for him, but the subject matter was profoundly alien. Child support, a legal custody agreement, visitation schedules. "Elena, I don't want a visitation schedule," he said, his eyes still on Noah. "I want to be his father, a real one. And what does that look like in your world, Liam? Does he fit in between your business trips to Dubai and your closing dinners?" The question was sharp, but he didn't flinch. He deserved it. "My world is changing," he said. "I've already cleared my schedule for the next month. I told my partners I'm on a personal leave of absence. I want to be here, as much as you'll let me." She looked skeptical. "For how long? Until you get bored? Until this becomes inconvenient?" "No," he said, meeting her gaze. "Forever. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll come here every day. I'll learn how to change him and feed him. I'll sit with him so you can sleep. I will earn my place in his life, Elena. And I'll do it on your terms." It was the first real negotiation of his new life. There was no leverage, no power play. There was only him, a broken man making a promise, and her, a wary, wounded woman deciding whether or not to believe him. She watched him for a long, silent minute, her gaze assessing, searching. 1 hour a day, she said finally. "That's what I can handle right now. You come here, you spend time with your son, and then you leave. No drama. No talking about the past. Are we clear?" "Clear," he said, his heart filled with a strange mixture of hope and humility. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a reconciliation. But it was a beginning. It was the first step on a long, arduous road toward rebuilding the world he had destroyed. The weeks that followed settled into a fragile, unspoken routine. Every day at 2:00, Liam would arrive at Isabel's house. He learned to leave his ambition and arrogance at the door, alongside his expensive Italian shoes. He came not as Liam Donovan, CEO, but simply as Liam, Noah's father. His 1 hour a day became his entire world. He mastered the art of changing a diaper, his initial clumsy fumbling slowly giving way to a practiced efficiency that earned a rare, fleeting smile from Eleanor. He learned that Noah liked to be held upright against his chest, his tiny head tucked under his chin. He learned the specific, off-key humming sound that could soothe him when he started to get fussy. These were small, insignificant victories, but to Liam they felt monumental. Each one was a single, fragile plank laid across the vast canyon of their broken past. He and Elena rarely spoke of anything personal. Their conversations were a carefully choreographed dance around the essentials. Noah's feeding schedule, his sleep patterns, a funny face he'd made. The past was a minefield, and they both trod carefully around its edges. Yet, in the shared silences, something was slowly shifting. One afternoon, Liam arrived to find Elena looking paler than usual, a hand pressed against her chest. Isabel was hovering nearby, her face etched with worry. "She's been having palpitations all morning," Isabel said in a low voice. "She won't admit it, but she's in pain." "Elena, you need to lie down," Liam said, his own heart clenching with fear. "Let me take him." "I'm fine," she insisted, her voice weak. But as she tried to stand, a wave of dizziness washed over her, and she sank back into the chair. Without another word, Liam gently took Noah from her arms. "Go rest," he commanded, his voice firm but gentle. "Isabel and I have got this. We're not going anywhere." Elena looked from him to her mother, a battle of pride and exhaustion playing out on her face. Exhaustion won. She nodded and slowly made her way to the spare bedroom. Liam's 1 hour stretched into 4. He held Noah, walked with him, and managed to successfully prepare and give him a bottle of expressed milk. When Noah finally drifted off to sleep, Liam placed him carefully in his bassinet, his movements filled with a reverence he never knew he possessed. He found Isabel in the kitchen, staring out the window. "Thank you," she said quietly. "She would never ask for your help, but she needs it." "I'm not going anywhere," he repeated, the words feeling less like a promise and more like a statement of fact. "How is she really?" Isabel sighed, her shoulders slumping. "She's brave, but she's scared. The doctor's appointment is next week. That will tell us everything. If the medication is working, if her heart is healing." The unspoken fear hung between them. And what if it isn't? When Elena emerged later, she looked a little better. She found Liam sitting quietly by the bassinet, just watching Noah sleep. "You're still here," she said, her voice neutral. "I told you I wasn't going anywhere." She stood beside him, and for a moment they were just two parents watching their son. It was the closest they had felt to being a team in over a year. "He has your nose," Liam said softly. "God help him," she replied, and a small, genuine laugh escaped her lips. The sound was like a balm on his raw soul. It was the first time he had heard her laugh since before the divorce. It was a fragile, beautiful sound, and he clung to it like a lifeline. He started extending his stays, his presence becoming a quiet, constant support. He would do grocery runs, cook the low-sodium meals he knew she needed, or simply sit with Noah so she could take a long, uninterrupted shower. He wasn't trying to win her back. He was just trying to be useful, to lighten the incredible load she had been carrying alone. He was earning his place, not with grand gestures or expensive gifts, but with the quiet currency of reliability. He was building a bridge, not back to the husband he was, but toward the father he wanted to be. And he started to hope just a little, that maybe, one day, she might meet him in the middle. The day of Elena's follow-up appointment with the cardiologist dawned grey and ominous. The Seattle sky a mirror of the anxiety churning in Liam's gut. Elena had insisted she could go alone, that Isabel could watch Noah. But Liam had been resolute. "I'm coming with you," he'd said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You are not doing this alone. Not anymore." To his surprise, she hadn't fought him. She'd simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the shift between them. Now, they sat in the sterile, quiet waiting room of the cardiology clinic, the same hospital where Noah had been born. The air was thick with a tension that was almost unbearable. Elena stared straight ahead, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap, her knuckles were white. Liam wanted to reach out, to take her hand, but he didn't dare cross that invisible line. Instead, he just sat beside her, a silent, solid presence. He had dismantled his old life with surprising ease. He had officially put his top associate in charge of day-to-day operations at his firm, stepping back to a consultant role. He'd put the penthouse on the market. The gilded cage had become a real prison, and he needed to be free of it. His friends, the ones who had toasted his divorce, were baffled by his transformation. He ignored their calls. They were part of a life that no longer felt real. The only thing that felt real was here, in this room, waiting for news that could either give them a future or shatter it completely. "Dr. Vance," a nurse called. They both stood. Liam followed Elena back into the examination room, his heart pounding in time with the nervous tap of her shoes on the floor. The cardiologist, a kind-faced woman named Dr. Chen, entered with a file and a warm but professional smile. "Elena, good to see you, and you must be Mr. Donovan." "Liam," he said, shaking her hand. "We have the results from your echocardiogram this morning," Dr. Chen said, opening the file. She looked over the charts, her brow furrowed slightly in concentration. The silence stretched, thin and taut, threatening to snap. "Well," Dr. Chen began, looking up at them. "Your ejection fraction. It hasn't improved as much as we'd hoped." Liam felt the floor drop out from under him. He looked at Elena. All the color had drained from her face. "What does that mean?" Elena asked, her voice barely a whisper. "It means your heart is still under significant strain," Dr. Chen explained gently. "The medication is helping, but it's not healing the muscle as quickly as we would like. The damage from the pregnancy was significant." "So what happens now?" Liam asked, his voice hoarse. "I want to admit you," Dr. Chen said, her gaze fixed on Eleanor. "Just for a few days. I want to administer some of the medication intravenously, monitor you around the clock, and run a few more advanced tests. I need a clearer picture of what we're dealing with. Admit her." The words echoed in the small room. It was happening again. The hospital, the fear, the uncertainty. But this time there was a crucial difference. This time she wasn't alone. Elena just nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She looked small and fragile, all her warrior strength momentarily gone. Without thinking, Liam finally did what he had been longing to do for weeks. He reached over and took her hand. His fingers wrapped around hers, a silent, unequivocal promise. "I'm here. We'll face this together." She didn't pull away. She squeezed his hand back, a desperate, grateful pressure. That night, Liam sat by her hospital bed, the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor, the only sound in the dimly lit room. Isabel was at home with Noah, and Liam had insisted on staying. Elena was asleep, her face peaceful for the first time that day. He watched her, the woman he had loved, lost, and was only now beginning to truly understand. He had thought her strength was quiet and unassuming. He now knew it was monumental, forged in fear and solitude. He had thrown away a love that was deeper and truer than anything he had ever known, all for the shallow pursuit of more. "I'm so sorry, Elena," he whispered into the darkness, the words a raw, painful confession. "I'm sorry for everything, for not seeing you, for not fighting for you, for not being the man you deserved." Her eyes fluttered open. She had been awake. "I know," she said, her voice soft. They looked at each other, the years of pretense and pain stripped away, leaving only the raw, vulnerable truth. There were no more secrets, no more blame. There was only the terrifying uncertainty of tomorrow, and the fragile, unshakable fact that they were finally, truly, facing it together. The hospital became their world. The rhythmic beeping of the monitor was its heartbeat, the scent of antiseptic its air. Liam never left. He slept in the uncomfortable visitor's chair, his long frame folded into an awkward position that left his back aching. But he didn't care. Physical discomfort was nothing compared to the emotional agony of watching and waiting. He became the gatekeeper, the logistician, the silent support system. He coordinated with Isabel, ensuring she had everything she needed for Noah. He fielded calls from Eleanor's worried colleagues at the pediatric clinic, offering calm, measured updates. He dealt with the hospital staff, his old commanding presence now softened into a quiet, respectful advocacy for Elena's comfort. He was no longer the arrogant millionaire who saw hospitals as a service to be purchased. He was a terrified partner and a desperate father, navigating a world where his money and influence meant nothing. The only currency that mattered here was patience, hope, and love. During the day, they existed in a strange domestic bubble within the four walls of the hospital room. When Elena was awake, they would talk. Not about the past, but about the future. They talked about Noah, about the funny faces he was starting to make, about who he would become. "He's going to be stubborn," Elena said one afternoon, a faint smile on her lips. "He gets it from both of us." "And he's going to be kind," Liam added. "He gets that from you." In these quiet moments, the walls between them continued to crumble. One evening, as he was helping her adjust her pillows, their hands brushed, and a spark of the old familiar connection passed between them. It was a ghost of a touch, but it was enough to make them both pause. "Liam," she said, her voice soft and serious. "Why did you leave?" The question he had been dreading, the one he knew he had to answer with complete honesty. He sat down on the edge of her bed, taking a deep breath. "Because I was a coward," he said, the admission costing him everything, and yet freeing him completely. "I was drowning in my own ambition, and I convinced myself that your contentment was holding me back. I was so focused on building an empire that I forgot how to build a life. Your happiness felt simple and pure, and I think it scared me, because it exposed how empty all my success really was. So I ran. I chose shiny and new over deep and true. It was the single greatest mistake of my life." Tears streamed down her face, but they weren't tears of anger. They were tears of a long-held pain finally being acknowledged. "I thought it was me," she whispered. "I thought I wasn't enough." "Oh, Elena," he said, his own voice thick with emotion. "You were always more than enough. I was the one who was lacking." He reached out and wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. It was an intimate, tender gesture that spoke more than words ever could. It was an apology, a confession, and a plea, all in one. On the third day, Dr. Chen came in with a team of specialists. They were going to perform a cardiac catheterization, a more invasive procedure to get a direct look at the pressures inside her heart. The risks were small, but they weren't zero. Before they wheeled her away, Elena gripped his hand. "Liam, if something happens—" "Don't!" he cut her off, his voice fierce. "Nothing is going to happen. You are going to come back to this room, and you are going to get better, and you are going to watch our son grow up. Do you understand me?" She looked at him, and for the first time in over a year, she looked at him with love. A bruised, battered, but resilient love. "Okay," she whispered. He waited in the hallway, a wreck of a man pacing a trench into the linoleum floor. Isabel arrived, her face pale, and they waited together, two souls bound by their love for the same woman. It was the longest 90 minutes of his life. Finally, Dr. Chen emerged from the procedure room, her surgical mask pulled down. Liam's heart stopped. He braced himself for the worst. Dr. Chen looked from Liam to Isabel, and a slow, wondrous smile spread across her face. "It's remarkable," the doctor said, shaking her head in disbelief. "I've never seen anything quite like it." "What is it?" Liam asked, his voice tight with apprehension. "What's remarkable?" Dr. Chen held up a tablet, displaying a series of complex graphs and images that meant nothing to him. "This is the data from the catheterization. We measured the pressures inside her heart chambers directly. And this," she swiped the screen, "is a new, high-resolution ultrasound we took just before the procedure." She paused, as if to gather her thoughts, her expression a mixture of clinical analysis and genuine awe. "Elena's ejection fraction, the measurement of how well her heart is pumping, it hasn't just stabilized, it has dramatically improved, from a dangerously low 30% last week to nearly 55% today." Isabel gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "What does that mean in English?" 55% is in the normal, healthy range," Dr. Chen said, her smile widening. "The intravenous medication obviously helped. But this kind of recovery, this quickly, it's exceptional. The muscle isn't just healing, it's regenerating in a way we rarely see. Medically, we don't have a perfect explanation for it. Sometimes the body just finds a way." Liam felt the world, which had been tilting precariously for weeks, finally settle back onto its axis. It wasn't fear making the room spin now. It was an overwhelming, dizzying wave of relief. He leaned against the wall, his legs suddenly weak. "So she's going to be okay?" he asked, the words catching in his throat. "She's going to be more than okay," Dr. Chen confirmed. "We'll keep her for another day, just for observation. But based on these numbers, she's on the path to a full recovery. She'll need to continue medication for a while, and have regular checkups, of course. But the crisis is over. It's like a miracle. A miracle." The word hung in the sterile hospital air, shimmering with possibility. He thought of all the nights he had sat vigil, of Isabel's quiet prayers, of the strength and love that had surrounded Eleanor. Maybe miracles weren't just bolts of lightning from the sky. Maybe they were woven from resilience, hope, and the human body's incredible will to heal for the ones it loves. When they wheeled Elena back into her room, she was groggy from the sedation, but awake. Liam and Isabel were waiting, their faces radiant. "They told you?" she asked, her voice soft. Liam knelt beside her bed and took her hand, pressing it to his lips. "They told us," he said, his voice thick with tears. "You did it, Elena. You fought. And you won." She smiled, a true, brilliant smile that lit up her entire face, erasing the last traces of exhaustion and fear. "We did it," she corrected him gently. That night, there was a different feeling in the room. The tense vigil had been replaced by a quiet, profound sense of gratitude. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. They just sat together, her hand resting in his, watching the city lights twinkle outside the window. A future that had been a terrifying question mark was now a beautiful, open road. The next day, as she was preparing for discharge, Liam found himself standing by the window, looking out at the same garden he had stared at the day Noah was born. It seemed like a lifetime ago. The man who had stood there then was a stranger to him now. Elena came to stand beside him. "What are you thinking about?" "About how much I almost lost," he said honestly. "Not just you and Noah, but myself. I was so lost, Elena. Thank you for being the lighthouse that guided me back." She leaned her head on his shoulder, a gesture of such easy, trusting intimacy, it made his heart swell. "You found your own way back, Liam. All I did was leave the light on." They stood in silence for a long moment, two survivors of a storm, their feet firmly planted on solid ground. The past was not forgotten, but its wounds were finally beginning to heal. The love they had almost destroyed had not only survived, it had been tempered in the fire of their ordeal, emerging stronger, purer, and more precious than before. Months melted into a year. The frantic fear of the hospital gave way to the gentle, demanding rhythm of life with a growing baby. Liam sold the penthouse and bought a sprawling, comfortable house in a quiet Tacoma neighborhood, just 10 minutes from Isabel's. It wasn't a flashy bachelor pad, it was a home with a big backyard for a swing set and a spacious kitchen that soon filled with the scent of baking bread and brewing coffee. He and Elena didn't rush back into their old relationship. There was no grand, romantic reunion. Instead, they focused on building something new, brick by patient brick. They were co-parents first, learning to navigate the beautiful chaos of raising a child together. They were partners, tag-teaming late-night feedings and celebrating milestones like Noah's first smile and first tooth. And slowly, cautiously, they were becoming friends again, rediscovering the easy laughter and deep respect that had first drawn them together. Liam had fundamentally changed. His ambition was still there, but it was rechanneled. He poured his energy into creating a stable, loving environment for his son. He found he was a natural father, his heart expanding in ways he never thought possible. The joy he felt watching Noah take his first wobbly steps was more profound than any 9-figure deal he had ever closed. One crisp autumn evening, a year after Noah's birth, they sat on the back porch, wrapped in blankets, watching their son chase fallen leaves across the lawn. The air was filled with the scent of wood smoke and the sound of Noah's delighted shrieks. "He's so happy," Elena said, leaning her head on Liam's shoulder. Her heart was strong, her health fully restored. The only trace of her ordeal was a newfound appreciation for the simple, quiet moments of life. "We're all happy," Liam replied, his arm wrapping around her. They had found their way back to each other, not by trying to recreate what they had lost, but by having the courage to build something entirely new. Their new foundation wasn't built on the naivete of young love, but on the hard-won wisdom of forgiveness, the strength of shared struggle, and the unbreakable bond forged by their love for their son. Liam looked at Elena, her face glowing in the soft light of the setting sun, and then at Noah, a whirlwind of pure joy. He had once believed that happiness was about acquisition, about having more. He now knew it was about presence, about being enough. "I love you, Elena," he said softly, the words filled with the weight of everything they had overcome. She turned to him, her eyes shining with a love that was deep, resilient, and true. "I love you too, Liam." It wasn't a dramatic climax. It was something better. It was a quiet, peaceful, and perfect beginning. Their story is a powerful reminder that sometimes our greatest mistakes can lead to our most profound blessings. It's about realizing that a true second chance isn't about erasing the past, but about having the courage to build a better future from its broken pieces. What did you think of Liam and Elena's journey? Have you ever witnessed a love story built on forgiveness and redemption? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and share it with someone who needs a reminder that it's never too late to change. Subscribe for more powerful, real-life stories.